Can you introduce yourself for people who don't know who you are?
My name is Clarke Blair. I've been associated with a fusion project for about 8 or 9 years, mostly as the business end of a company called CSI. The scientist is Devlin Baker, and he's been doing all the hard work, of course. I'm the chief operating officer, and acting CEO and president of the board of directors. My job is to take care of the capital stock, do a lot of the documentation, take care of the website, and try to raise funds. Those are my basic duties. And Devlin does the science. And there are a few other folks associated with the company, a married couple named Savannah and Rodney Rice, and a few other scientists and associates that have helped us along the way. Unfortunately, I'm not much of a scientist. I get the basic concepts, but don't ask me to explain it.
You said 8 or 9 years ago. Can you take me back to the beginning and the formation of the company?
Sure. I met a guy named Daniel Bateman in March of 2008 in San Francisco, and he's the one that first got me excited about fusion. He subsequently introduced me to Devlin Baker. About 2 years after that, Devlin and I and the Rices and a few others decided to form our own company, Convergent Scientific Inc. We had a couple of false starts in there. I was new at it, so I wasn't really sure how to do it. We tried it a couple of different ways and eventually settled on the structure we have now. Our corporation is a C Corp, so it's compliant with all the laws of California. We issued capital stock. We keep very close track of all the accounting and stock purchases. We have options granted to people. It's all very official. There might be other ways to do it, but this seems to work for us. Ever since that time, I've been putting money in, I don't know, $80,000 or $90,000 by now. And ever since that time, I've been helping to raise money, support Devlin, do all the things I described earlier as far as my duties with the company. So for the last 5, 6, 7 years, basically just been supporting Devlin as he does his research, his simulations. We built some small devices in the lab and had some success with those. We have some IP built up. And the last year or so, we've been negotiating with the guy to buy the company. It just didn't work out. And now we're back looking for venture capital to kick this thing off the right way. So here we are today.
Back in 2009, you formed the company. What was your first goal?
I did what I could do and encouraged others to do what they can do. Stuck within my limits of knowing how to operate a spreadsheet and how to help build a website and reach out to my limited contacts to try to raise some dough. I learned about the corporate structure as I went along. Of course, the internet helps on downloading documents. I had some legal help from high-priced lawyers. But mostly we just put it together ourselves based on what felt natural.
What was the hardest part?
Since the goal is to raise money to do science, the hardest part is lighting a fire under investors so they see it in the same light I do. A lot of them just see it as, what kind of return can I get in 2 years instead of how can I help save the planet, bring forth a really cool technology. And I'm innocent in that I think maybe there's a whole bunch of people out there who just want to do cool technology. And unfortunately, I've found that 99% of them, all they care about is how can I get money back out of this in a couple of years. They don't have any kind of long-term goal in mind. At least I haven't met the guys that do, although I understand they're out there because people like Paul Allen and Jeff Bezos have put big money into some of these things with no promise of return. Maybe the hardest part is not having the contacts that I can just pick up and call or email and say, hey, I've got this really great idea. Let's have a look at the website and then you can give us some money, okay? It never works out that way. The risk is too high and they're all very tight-fisted. They're all busy. They've all got investments in other speculative projects. They don't have time for fusion to work. I talked to a very famous investor. Somehow I got him on the phone. And the first thing he said was, how many PhDs do you have in your company? That was a hard thing, justifying the fact they should put money into something where a guy's just been looking at this for 12 years and has no big letters behind his name. Yeah, the hardest thing is actually getting him on the phone, and not with me, but with Devlin, so Devlin can do the talk.
How many people would you say you've talked to?
It's difficult to get people to talk to you. They're all busy, of course. I send emails to potential investors with no response. There's a group called Karetsu that's an investment company, so I went down to their office and sat and talked to them about it, gave them a presentation. Tried to do it through other people's contacts, someone who knows Nathan Mervold. And, I'm sure we can get him on the phone. Of course, we didn't. Send letters to Peter Thiel. We'd send letters to people randomly in Silicon Valley. Just hard to get contacts established with them.
This probably seems counterintuitive because you're in California.
In Southern California.
Which is supposed to be some haven of investment technology.
But I have a full-time job. I'm a consultant in a completely different space. And so I don't have time at 11 o'clock in the morning to pick up the phone or be busy emailing people. So it's only nights and weekends I can really focus on this.
Do you have a moment or a day or an event that really meant something?
High points are when Devlin would complete an experiment and he told us what he had proven, especially when we got Model 1 working, and we'd put a lot of work into it, and then he had videos of the mini star there in the can, and that was exciting. And getting to know different people, that was always good. The whole focus, of course, is creating a fusion device, and so any minor steps we made toward getting there were the most exciting.
When you met somebody that said they wanted to get involved, could you kind of smell if they were going to be someone who would stick around for a while?
I could never quite judge that. Mostly it's my friends and family, and most of them were pretty good about sticking around. They're not going anywhere, and the amounts of money they put in weren't enough to make a huge difference one way or the other. Most people were fine. A guy I've known for 50 years from Salt Lake City, he put some money in, and then his brother put some money in, and then my brothers who've done fairly well, they put some money in. So they've all pretty much stuck around.
What are the low points being in the company?
Well, we always felt we were making progress every day as long as Devlin was able to do some kind of work, just a couple hours a week. But probably the lowest point was negotiating with this guy who said he was going to buy all our stock. And at some point, 6 or 8 months into that, realizing that he was a fraud and that we had spent a lot of time and mental energy trying to negotiate with him or thinking about how I was going to have money in my life in the near future. So the lowest point was when we realized that was all going to just fall apart.
I know you met with one venture capitalist in person.
Probably say that the closest I got was when Savannah and I met in San Francisco with a guy who was a Google guy, but it was another one of these investment clubs where you go in and you present your ideas to someone like this dude, and then they go to their friends and say, do you want to put money into this? So the closest we ever got was that guy probably, and it was a little PowerPoint presentation. And of course I couldn't explain the science, so I went with the high points. That was probably the closest I got to talking to a real VC. We had several phone conversations, like 5 or 10 with people. The other guy I talked to was in Phoenix. Devlin and I went down to Phoenix and talked to this guy named Judd Hirschberger, who owns shopping malls, kind of an older guy looking to do something with his money. And for some reason, we couldn't convince him either. He was even closer because we had charts and graphs and Devlin was sitting there explaining it to him. So that was probably even closer than the guy I talked to. But once again, he said, well, if I put $1 million in this now, I'm going to have to put another $1 million in next year, and I'll be the only guy putting money in. Like all these guys do, every single one of them has another project. And this guy's other project was some kind of fertility pill or going to improve the sex lives of millions of Americans. So he was busy on that. That guy was a personal friend of my brother, and so I thought it was really a pretty good possibility. So it's tough not knowing what it is that you're not saying that would be the key words that would make someone go, yes, I'll write a check. You never really quite know that.
If you could go back 8 years and tell yourself some piece of advice going forward, what would it be and why?
Probably wouldn't change much of anything because for those 6 or 7 years up until last March, I thought we were doing the right thing at all times. I couldn't have been a better fundraiser because I didn't know any more science. I feel like it's all just happened like it was going to happen. The only thing I would change is last March, I would have told the investor guy, sorry, you're a fraud. We're not going to screw around with you. That's water under the bridge now. It doesn't make me less excited about it. I'm going to keep trying. It's going to take longer, that's all. Yeah, back in 2008, I thought I'm going to be rich by 2012. I used to fly out of Long Beach Airport every Monday to fly to my job in San Francisco. And I'd look at all the private planes sitting there, $30 million G5s and stuff. And I'm thinking, someday I'm going to have one of those because I'm inventing fusion. That hasn't happened. I thought it was going to happen a lot faster. Back in 2008, I thought it's just a matter of a couple of months or a year before we convince somebody this is going to work. And we can build a device in a couple of years. And, we did all kinds of projections and pro formas and PowerPoint presentations showing that by the year 2016, we'd be replacing coal-fired power plants with a fusion device. And here we are today, still trying.
If you had one thing that you would change about the environment in which you're pitching or the people that you're talking to, what would you change?
Yeah. I don't know what I could have changed other than change people's minds somehow and say the thing that would make them open their wallet. I just don't know what that is, so I can't say how I would change it.
So where does the company stand right now?
We've kind of run out of gas on the $10,000 and $20,000 investments. We've made a lot of progress with those. We've boxed up the lab, put it in a storage space. Could be reconstituted fairly quickly if we had a substantial amount of money to put in. We decided we can't do it for 10 or 20,000 bucks. Pretty much decided we need a major investor of between $1 and $3 million to hire the right people, buy the right equipment, go to the next phase of the device, which is expensive magnets, a big expensive vacuum chamber, other types of instruments and things. I'm hiring 2 or 3 people to help us both develop it and build it. So right now we're at this place where we've got some IP, we've got simulations, we've got a really smart guy named Devlin Baker. And we just need this level of funding that allows us to go to the next step in building a device. We're in a holding pattern, you might say.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I'm still optimistic. I wouldn't want to leave the pessimistic message with you. I am really very optimistic. It's just a time. I take that perspective that 1,000-year horizon in front of them. We all think in terms of what am I going to do tomorrow or next week. So if it takes another 10, 20 years, so be it. In the meantime, I've got other stuff I can do that's satisfying to me.
Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, if this message goes out to anybody who hears it, the world can't live on coal-fired power plants. Solar and wind aren't going to cover it. Fusion's ready to go, but nobody wants to admit that the government or private companies have to put enough money into it to develop the technology. And you yourself, Matt, have done a lot of studies on the underfunding problem. And I'm totally with you on that. It just needs more money thrown at it and a lot more experimentation. It just has to be investigated, build some devices, especially in polywell.
Somebody out there is going to listen to this and they're going to have an idea and they're going to want to start a company. Do you have any advice for how they might go about doing that?
I guess I'd recommend getting a lawyer involved so you can set up the corporate structure correctly. Like I said, we hadn't done this before. We were just getting into it. First couple of months, I wasn't sure what the difference was between the board of directors and the officers of the company. I was never quite sure which came first, and someone had to explain to me that the board of directors appoints or elects the officers of the company. I do recommend that people immediately establish a subchapter C corporation and get the capital stock thing figured out right at the beginning. If someone wants to put money in the company, the first thing they're going to want to know is who's got the rest of the stock, how much am I going to get for how much money, is it going to be diluted or not when more people buy stock. So even if you're not scientific and you don't understand the technology you're going after, you can definitely master the corporate details pretty quickly, get all that set up right. It takes a few $1,000s to get started, but it's good to do it right the first time, not do it on a spreadsheet and a subchapter S. You go right to a subchapter C and pay the money it takes to set one up right. Then everything else is easy. When people want to give you $10,000 or $20,000, there's a place to put it, and there's a way to give them their ownership in the company the right way. If someone does want to give you money and all you have is a good idea and a bank account, they're not going to write you a check for $20,000 if they don't know how it's being used or where it's going or what ownership they get. So get the corporate details set up correctly. That's my advice to people. And I don't have any advice on how to find venture capital, apparently. Or I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today.
That's all I got.
That's it?
That's it.
All right. I'm going to go out and sand wood on my artwork.
Do that.
It's very therapeutic.
Okay.
All right. Well, good to talk to you, Matt.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
See you later.